Today's show is all about the future of the world. I hope that got your attention. The reason we're talking about the future is because, as well as trying to find solutions to the problems of today, the UN is also attempting to work out how to make sure there's a better future for all of us. Well, how are they doing it? And why is an event taking place at UN headquarters this summer so important? Welcome to UN Weekly. It's Conor Lennon, and I have with me once again Benno Schwinghammer, UN Correspondent for German press agency Deutsche Presse-Agentur. Guten Morgen, Servus, Grüezi, Willkommen. That's it for me. I can't do anything.
How are you?
I hope that was okay. And we're also welcoming back Mayra Lopes from the UN News Portuguese Unit. Bom dia. How's that?
Bom dia, that's great. Hi, Conor.
Right. Well, it's great to have you both here. We have a German, we have a Brazilian. Sorry, guys, I have to bring this up. Sorry, Mayra. Anyway, 2014, 10 years ago, when I think of Germany and Brazil, it's the first thing that comes to mind. I hope this isn't too much of a traumatic memory for you, Mayra. I suspect it might be.
It is. It is. For those who don't know what we're talking about, there was a historical match between Brazil and Germany. It didn't end up very well for us. Yeah,
7-1 to Brazil. An extraordinary game.
Wow, 10 years later, right? Do we?
I know. It must have been quite traumatic for nations because we know how much Brazil loves football and has that history of winning so many World Cups. I remember seeing grown men crying in the stands. Benno, stop smiling. And no, seriously, was it like a massive national event
in Brazil?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. It's one of those things that you remember exactly where you were and what was happening.
Like the moon landings.
Yes. So, of course, we were at my parents. We were having this huge party with a lot of friends, family, eating feijoada. And then everything happened. And everybody was very sad. And a little
I have to admit, I recently rewatched that game on YouTube. And as you know, there is the Euro Championship right now. We have a big game in the next
and Copa America with Brazil.
Exactly. We need another Belo Horizonte moment.
Yes, that would be quite helpful. No, I remember Germans actually looking a bit embarrassed about how it was going. But look, why don't we just move on for now, draw a veil over that and get to our discussion of the day. Well, our main topic today is the future, or rather the Summit of the Future, which doesn't take place until September, but a really big event for the United Nations. There's so many strands to it that we wanted to start walking you through this in this show, and we'll come back to it in future shows. We're going to hear an excerpt from my interview with one of the main architects of the summit shortly. But first of all, let's talk about this event that's going to serve as a kind of a preview, you could say, of the Summit of the Future, which is coming up next week. It starts on the 8th of July. And it's called the High-Level Political Forum of Sustainable Development. Why don't we try and break that down a little bit and explain what that's all about? Mayra, why don't you just kick us off? Because I know in the UN newsroom, you're going to have to be covering this as the rest of us are.
So this is part of one of many events that we have to discuss what we call the SDGs, that are the Sustainable Development Goals or the global goals. It's mostly the 17 goals that goes from zero poverty and hunger to gender equality, good conditions for work, environment, of course. And this event that's happening next week, some of the countries will be analyzed in what kind of progress they did over the past years. One of them is Brazil. So let's see what comes up.
Right. So the point really is for countries to come and see how they've done on these sustainable development goals. I think we need to take a real backtrack here and just talk about what these goals are and where this all started. So in 2015, you had the Paris Agreement on climate change, and you also had this 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Basically, the idea to make the world a better place and set 2030 as this nominal deadline to get a bunch of very ambitious things done, as you said, including poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, all the big things that the UN says that we need to have a fairer future. Let me just turn that over to you, Benno. I mean, it's such a big thing with so many strands to it. How are you able to explain this to non-UN insiders like us in your German-speaking world?
I mean, like it starts with not using the UN language, because in fact, as a journalist who is obviously not affiliated at all with the UN, I can say it. I think the branding SDGs, it starts with something people don't want to listen to, because like it's too technical. So I call it very often like the SDGs, and then I call it the Human Global Goals from the United Nations and so on. And so I try to make it more tangible and say what we're talking about. And then obviously focusing on progress is important. But right now, and the SG talked about it, I think 4 or 5 days ago, it doesn't look good. Just 17% of the goals are on track. And we are facing most of the agenda being stalled or even in regress, or at least a big part of the agenda. So that's actually what the Sustainable Development Goals right now have in common with cooperation internationally, I think.
Okay, well, look, why don't we, for sake of argument for this show, let's just call them the global goals to really simplify it. As you say, in the outside world, that's very often what they're called. And what the HLPF, no more acronyms. I won't say HLPF anymore. The High Level Political Forum, the event that's taking place in July, it's been taking place every year since 2015, when this agenda was kicked off by all the countries of the world. And it's a check-in, isn't it? It's a stock take. How are we doing? What's been achieved? What hasn't? Benno, as you said, not looking great. We're more than halfway, and only 17% of these goals have been achieved. And as you said, Mayra, some of the countries, I think around 30 odd countries, are going to be presenting their progress, and some of it is negative, some of it is positive. There is some positivity here. There are a few things that have been going well. I think child mortality has gone down. I think in terms of parity between girls and boys in schools, that's also improved. But I mean, to be fair to everyone, we did have in the meantime a global pandemic, and that we can see the graphs on that, can't we? We can see the data that before the pandemic, things were improving. And then as the pandemic hit and afterwards, a lot of things have gone stalled or gone in reverse.
Well, you're saying that only 17% is on track. There is the exact same amount that is really off track. So it balances. It is funny that it's exactly the same figure, and then in between you have some things that are progressing slower or not exactly the way it was supposed to. But of course, as you both just mentioned, the SG, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said that the world is getting this failing grade in progressing with the global goals. But yes, Conor, as you said, there are a few things that did well. So child mortality is one of them, but there's also renewable energy that we saw some progress. Of course, there is something there that we saw that only 25 countries really did great progress and received good financing to really progress with renewable sources of energy. But still, it's something that progressed. There's also the prevention of HIV infections that are progressing. And I have the figure here, if you might, but there is this progress as well in clean cooking technologies. This might sound a little I don't know if you have the clear idea of what that is. But this is a very important issue in many parts of the world, that people do not have the right technology to cook. That means that can cause a great impact to their health.
Oh, yeah, it's a life-saving issue. As you say clean cooking, and you think, well, why is this important? But you're quite right. You know, we've seen this in many countries where people are cooking with burning plastic or burning other toxic things in areas that aren't well ventilated, and they're dying from lung-related diseases. And we're talking about huge numbers. So just being able to get people clean cooking material is a massive lifesaver. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this? Well, this does lead into the Summit of the Future, which we'll come to shortly. But before then, who's going to break it down? It is, of course, Pauline Batista, who will be explaining for us right now in just 60 seconds I don't know how she does this. 60 seconds. What is the summit of the future?
Hi, I'm Pauline Batista, and this is the UN Explained. Now, what is the Summit of the Future? The Summit of the Future is a chance to get back on track, and it will consider how we cooperate both to achieve goals and tackle emerging threats. The goal is to eventually agree on a pact for the future. The pact will be negotiated and endorsed by countries both before and during the summit in September 2024 here at the UN HQ in New York City. In sum, the summit is a high-level event that will bring world leaders together to forge a new international consensus or an agreement, or how we deliver a better present and safeguard the future. I know, it was a lot again, but would you like to learn even more? You can go to news.un.org and search Summit of the Future. Ciao!
Thank you, Pauline, for clearing that up for us. But to get to grips with the Summit of the Future, dig in a bit about what it's all about, I got to speak to Michelle Griffin. She's the policy director of the summit. I mean, we've seen a huge range of topics being discussed, but I wanted to get Michelle's take on a subject that does frequently attract a lot of controversy. Yes, it's the UN Security Council, which we talk about many times a week at UN News. There's been talk of reform for decades, so I asked her if she thinks this summit could finally lead to a change for the better.
Well, for sure, the summit is hoping to deliver some kind of step forward on Security Council reform. Obviously, it's a very difficult nut to crack if we're only talking about the composition of the council or the use of the veto. But I do think that there's a massive upswell in recognition on the part of member states themselves, including the P5, that some form of change is needed. And the Secretary General has certainly been very clear that he thinks that change is needed to the composition of the council so that it is more trusted and more effective and more legitimate in the eyes of the people that it's trying to serve. But I think it's also important to think beyond just the Security Council, because again, many of the most consequential and existential challenges and problems that we're going to face in the future are not necessarily the kinds of challenges that the Security Council was designed to solve. They're not necessarily peace and security challenges in the first instance. Think about climate change. So a lot of the ideas that we've put on the table in this summit are not only about looking at these existing structures and trying to think about how we can reform or adapt them to a new world, but also about how we, again, flexibly use all of the structures and pull all of the actors together who can be part of solving these problems. So, a big through thread of the ideas in the Common Agenda report and in this summit are really about ideas around networked inclusive multilateralism. And what we mean by that is, how do we bring all of the actors together that have the power to solve problems and shape people's lives. It's not just about states anymore. It's about private actors who have immense power in the world today. When you think about climate change and energy transitions and the fossil fuel industry, for instance, or when you think about our information ecosystem and misinformation and disinformation and the role of social media platforms, for instance, or you think about the private actors who now have the capacity to be up in space. So, one idea in the summit is an emergency platform, which would kind of allow us to convene all of the different actors across many sectors to bring to bear all of the power and energy and resources that,
like a kind of rapid reaction force.
Certainly not a force, but it's essentially...
Not in the military term, but in terms of bringing the people from around the system together to deal with a crisis in a very short space of time.
Exactly. It's really about using the UN's convening power in a way that is suitable to today's challenges and problems, and also to a much more diverse landscape of actors. So the whole point of this summit is really about adapting the international architecture to the political and economic and social realities of today and to the problems and opportunities that we're going to face in the future.
Okay, well, the Summit of the Future is taking place at UN headquarters on the 22nd and 23rd of September. Simple logistical question. How on earth are you going to fit all that into 2 days?
Well, because it's not just 2 days. First, it's actually 4 days because we're holding 2 action days, multi-stakeholder action days before the formal summit to bring together all of those different kinds of actors, as I mentioned. But also, this has been a conversation that's been going on already for 3 years. So, a huge amount of work and thinking and mobilizing has already happened. We'll be in Nairobi next week at a big civil society conference where over 4,000 civil society organizations are coming together to give us their inputs for the summit. And of course, the summit will not be the end of the story. In many ways, it'll be the beginning of the story, because hopefully the pact that the summit will produce will contain big signals and big kind of directions of travel on many issues that, will continue to be talked about and on which progress will continue to be made after the summit itself.
Okay. And are there any particular topics, any particular parts of the summit that you're looking out for or that we should be looking out for?
Sure. I mean, I am very keen on the thinking around future generations and how do we adapt our decision making to take account of future generations, understanding now that we affect them and actually are harming them in many of the decisions we make. So there'll be a declaration on future generations that looks to put in place practical mechanisms for how we take them into account. There will be a global digital compact, which looks at the full gamut of developments with respect to digital technology and AI. How do we harness all of the benefits and all of the advances that those developments kind of can offer people for the vast majority of humanity and not just for the few, but also how do we manage the risks that those developments have created, whether that's with respect to weaponization of AI, lethal autonomous weapons, even weaponization of outer space, militarization of outer space. Outer space is another good example. It used to be that very few countries had the capacity to be up there. We now have countless countries with the capacity to be up there, private actors as well. How do we manage all of the space traffic, the space debris, the exploration? How do we do that in a way that again benefits the majority of humanity and not just the few? And also, how do we manage the risks? How do we prevent an arms race up in outer space? So there's a lot in the summit that I think is very exciting, but there are also some things there that where we really have to address long-standing issues that prevent us cooperating effectively because they prevent us rebuilding the trust that we've lost in each other. So it's definitely a mix of the old and the new and of adapting this, old architecture to very new threats, but also new opportunities.
That was Michelle Griffin, Policy Director of the Summit of the Future. The full interview, it's about 20 minutes, is on UN Web TV and the UN YouTube channel. Now, just before we go any further, Benno, I just wanted to get your take on the Summit of the Future. What are you saying? What are you planning to say to people about that, about what it is and what it's all about?
Well, I don't want to jump the gun before we know what the real results are in the end, but I can say for now, Michelle Griffin is a professional. She knows exactly how to answer this question. But I have the draft in front of me right now. So far, there is not even language in the negotiations about how the Security Council could be reformed or not. So right now, we are in a negotiation phase, and I know that the ambition of the Secretary General that wants a bold push is not met by the text right now. So for now, I hope there will be a breakthrough, but I remain skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these events, UN events, there's always a document at the end. Sometimes it's always agreed beforehand. Other times, the UN Climate Conference is a great example. People are working on it every day during the conference, and we never quite know what's going to happen. It can get quite fraught. Is your sense that this is going to be more like one of those conferences where nothing is agreed until we get nearer the time, or even during the conference itself?
I do think there will be something agreed, but I think we're on track for an outcome which lacks the ambition that the Secretary General wanted. I mean, this summit is not for no reason in the pole position of all the UN summit slots there can be. It's right in front of UNGA because the Secretary General sees it as a centerpiece of reforming the United Nations because the world changed and the UN has to change. From what I see for now is that this text might be a memorandum of understanding rather than like something like a reform agenda. We are like not at a place where countries agree to actual numbers, percentages, figures, where they are actually saying we need to change. They basically all say so far in the text, we need to do more of this and we have to accelerate this. But there's no clarity in words to what that means. So for now, we're not there yet, I guess.
Well, it's good that we're going to keep talking about it then, because we do have a fair few weeks to go. It's going to be taking place in September, as you say, Benno, during the UN General Assembly High-Level Week. And we will be very, very present during that week as well. And that's almost it for the show for today. But I want to just go from the future to the past. Who knows Tunguska, Siberia, 1908? Either of you remember that? Bit before your time.
Really.
Yeah.
Okay, listen to this. 1908, June 30th, a meteor flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of forest. Luckily, only 3 people were killed, quite a remote place. The earth shook as if the sky split in two, is what they said. Now, June 30th, which was just a couple of days ago, is now International Asteroid Day. And it was founded by the famous physicist, who I'm sure you've both heard of, Stephen Hawking. But it was also founded by a guitarist, a famous British guitarist from a famous band. Now, can either of you guess who that famous guitarist is? I'll give you a clue. He's still alive. It's a band that everyone will know. Any thoughts?
I won't make a fool out of myself. No, I don't try.
British guitarist. It was Brian May from Queen.
Okay.
Because Brian May, because Brian May is also an astrophysicist. He is a very, very intelligent man, and he has many degrees, and he knows everything there is to know about astrophysics. So there you go. So Brian May, Queen, that's a good one for your down the bar discussions with people. A great bit of information for you to share. So the United Nations raises awareness about asteroids now on this day and how to protect Earth. So what do asteroids have to do with the United Nations? What is the link? Well, Detlef Koshny and Kelly Fast are from the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Yes, there is such a thing, and we'll be talking to them in shows to come. They're based in Vienna. They explain what the connection is.
If you wanted to deflect an asteroid, a simple way is to send a spacecraft to actually hit the asteroid. It's like, I call it a cosmic car accident. This is exactly what NASA did, where they demonstrated that this can be done. There are always asteroids falling down on our planet. There was one just a week ago where meteorites were found in the field. The Chelyabinsk event, which was a 20-meter object, it occurred about 10 years ago. And something like that could happen typically every 100, maybe a few hundred years. It damaged a lot. I mean, there were 1,500 injured people.
Asteroid exploration is important both for science sake. These are the leftovers of the formation of the solar system. But also, if we ever found an asteroid that posed an impact threat to Earth, we would want to know as much about it as possible, both for science sake and for planetary defense.
We are setting up systems that inform us that something could happen. We're setting up contacts to emergency response agencies. It's a bit like earthquakes, only we can actually predict the event very well. There are currently 2 places on this planet where risk predictions are done, one in Europe, one in the US, and both of them predict impact probabilities 100 years into the future. Asteroid Apophis will come really close in the year 2029. It will be inside the geostationary belt of satellites, where we have all these telecommunication satellites, weather satellites. There's nothing to be worried about. It's a large object, almost 400 meters in size. but we know that it will fly by at about 30,000 kilometers to the Earth within just a few kilometers. So it will not hit the Earth, but that could happen at some later flyby.
International cooperation is critical because asteroids are something that affect the entire planet. It takes the whole world to bring to bear capabilities to find asteroids, determine their orbits, and asteroid impacts could affect anywhere on Earth. And so it is really important that it is a worldwide collaboration because it is a worldwide issue.
I hope that has reassured those of you who saw the Netflix movie Don't Look Up. I think you've seen it, Benno. Mayra, have you seen that with Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence? Yes, I know it was a metaphor. I understand that, but hopefully you can sleep a little bit easier when it comes to asteroids. Thank you, Benno. Thank you, Mayra. It's been a pleasure, as always. I have added links to the Summit of the Future, the Secretary General's Sustainable Development Goals report, and the High-Level Political Forum website. It's all there. You can check out all the data yourself if you're interested. Your feedback is important to us. Please do send your comments, your thoughts, your suggestions to unweekly@un.org. And don't forget, look out for UN Weekly on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts online. The executive producer of today's show was Mita Hassali. UN Weekly is a UN News production.